All right, everyone, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for Cybersecurity Threats, Best Practices to Protect Your Organization. I'm Jackie Petroselli, the Marketing Specialist at MP. For those of you joining us on a webinar for the first time, MP is a full-service human capital management services company offering a suite of products and services including HR, payroll, benefits administration, time and attendance, and compliance. We support our clients with cutting-edge technical solutions, as well as proactive, reliable service and deep HR payroll expertise. MP is wired for HR and helps clients succeed by tying their operations to their business goals. We also have our friends from FlightPath with us today presenting today's topic. FlightPath IT is a technology success partner, TSP, for small and medium businesses in the greater Boston area and beyond. FlightPath helps businesses succeed and thrive through the efficient use of technology. They specialize in data protection and data security services and solutions, along with communication services and professional services. FlightPath IT ensures that you always have access to the data you need while making sure unauthorized people do not. In 2020, FlightPath IT ranked 182 on the MSP 501, a ranking of the top 501 TSPs and MSPs in the world. Our presenters today from FlightPath are Nicole and Jonathan. Jonathan Sheldon is the director of FlightPath IT. He has been helping small businesses succeed and thrive for over 15 years through the efficient use of technology. Jonathan's focus is customer service and building rewarding relationships with clients and partners alike. Jonathan is a specialist in managing technology services, particularly operations, security, and disaster recovery. He was among the first students in the US to graduate with a Bachelor of Science in Information Technology from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Nicole Scanlon is a senior project manager at FlightPath IT. She's responsible for organizing and prioritizing projects, as well as assisting in daily operations for FlightPath, with responsibilities including sales, marketing, and operations. She's an energetic professional with over 10 years of combined experience in project management, process improvement, and technologies. Nicole has strong experience working with C-level management, small business owners, and town officials, including but not limited to police and fire departments throughout the state of Massachusetts. A few fun facts about Nicole. She earned her bachelor's and MBA from Southern New Hampshire University, and she spends her free time volunteering as a coach for the Special Olympics and enjoys taking improv classes at Improv Boston when time allows. So our disclaimer, as always, this training is intended for educational and informational purposes only. While we hope that you will learn a lot today, we are not attorneys and the information should not be construed as legal advice. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic off to Jonathan to get started.
All right, thank you, Jackie, for the wonderful introduction. As Jackie mentioned, I'm Jonathan Sheldon, the director of FlightPath IT. We are a TSP, as we like to call it, a technology success partner or technology solutions provider. It's also sometimes known as an MSP. Today we'll be covering cybersecurity and why it's important, and some of the abstract threats businesses face, as well as specific threats and the solutions to those specific threats. Finally, we'll give a brief overview of where we think the near future is going. So first off, cybersecurity is defined as the state of being protected against the criminal or unauthorized use of electronic data or the measures taken to achieve this. But why is cybersecurity important? Why bother with cybersecurity? Cybercrime is the most prolific and profitable type of crime in the world, and it's relatively easy to commit. People as young as 10 could be committing cybercrimes, and people as old as 100 as well. We found out recently that in 2020, for the first time, the sum of all cybercrime earnings in the world was 1% of the world's gross domestic product. So it's lucrative and easy to do. Why bother with cybersecurity as a small business? It comes down to value. Cybersecurity can be costly, and actually our typical client spends between $100 and $300 per employee per month on cybersecurity and cloud products. But we find that not protecting your business is going to be significantly more costly because you're going to put yourself out there for theft and loss of data, and you really need to protect your assets and intellectual property. There's also the idea that compliance and regulatory is part of cybersecurity. So a lot of businesses nowadays are under certain compliance and regulatory rules in the states or countries they're in. And those governing bodies are really touting cybersecurity as necessary these days. And then finally, you want to consider investment. We consider proper cybersecurity deployment as similar to a homeowner's insurance, where you're protecting yourself against fire and floods and other threats. So you're investing in a known protection, a known cost versus the cost of a potential disaster. In this case, a potential disaster for your business is, anything from fines, loss of revenue, loss of clients, but also as far as losing your entire livelihood. So we want to say, don't be an easy target. There was a recent supply chain attack on a company called SolarWinds, and they provide software that allows IT administrators to control computers at enterprises and large businesses. And it made the news because through this attack, many branches of the US government, some security vendors such as FireEye, and even a big company, Microsoft, were targets of this. And so, you can't always protect 100% against any cybersecurity threat, because if there's someone with enough resources and will, such as an enemy nation, plans to put all of their resources behind it, they are likely to find a way to get in. So the main plan with cybersecurity is you want to be hard to reach as opposed to low-hanging fruit. We used to talk about cybersecurity as being an onion. There's many layers to peel back, many layers of protection to peel back before you get at the core. But we started thinking more, and we've said with the right type of knife, you can get right to the core of an onion. So it's not the best analogy. So now we're saying, think of cybersecurity like a bank vault, where there's many parallel security measures in place. There's guards, there's different types of locks, there's different types of environmental sensing, there's alarms, there's detectors, and you have to be able to subvert each and every single one of them in order to get to the money in the center of the vault. So we always say more is not always better, but with cybersecurity, more usually is better. So now I'm going to cover some abstract threats, but I wanted to lead off with one of my favorite quotes. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, attributed to Mike Tyson. So some of the abstract threats that businesses face with cybercrime and cybersecurity, there's three main ones. The first one is downtime. The second one is breaches. The third is data loss. And we'll cover each of those in a little bit more depth, but all three of these threats will monetarily affect your business in ways such as cleanup costs, regulatory fines, and even going so far as to potential loss of business or livelihood. And then, we talk about preventing cybercrime with cybersecurity, but prevention is not the only step. A fully fleshed out cybersecurity deployment actually has four cornerstones. So there's prevention, preventing those things from happening, but there's also detection and trying to make sure, if something is happening, that we're knowing about it and detecting it. Responding to it, if something does happen, we have to have a proper response in place. And usually the proper response also includes recovery and how do you get back to normal if an incident does occur. So the first risk we mentioned is downtime. And what is the cost of downtime? Think about if your main business app, your main line of business was down, or your data was down for 1 week. What would happen to your business? Or alternatively, if you can't serve your clients and customers for a week, what would happen to your reputation? One of our vendors, Datto, has published a recovery time and downtime cost calculator. You can actually go to it by going to datto.com/RTO. And when you go there, there's a set of questions that you fill out with certain numbers that are pertaining to your business. And they'll give you a calculator of what a typical downtime event would cost you But if you take a typical business that has, say, 40 employees that are making approximately $50,000 each per year, then for every hour you're down, you're losing $4,000 an hour just in monetary value. And that comes out to $160,000 per week for a 40-hour week. So that's just the monetary cost. And you can see that adds up really quickly. The second type of abstract threat we're talking about today is breaches. And a breach is when a bad actor or a threat has come in and stolen your data and potentially published your data as well. So the average cost of a breach for a US company in 2020 was $8.64 million. And that averages out to over $242 per breached record. As you're thinking to yourself right now, most businesses can probably not absorb that kind of a hit. I would say most folks on the line today aren't necessarily working for businesses that are even making $8.64 million per year. So what would that, would that completely, kill your business? And then even with a great cybersecurity insurance policy, it won't necessarily be able to get you back on your feet when, you're hitting $8.64 million. And that's the average. So that includes, large enterprise companies as well. But right here in this, there's a link here. You can actually go and do the cost of a data breach report for a company of your size. So the third abstract threat we're talking about today is irretrievable data loss. So what is that? That is when a server with your data on it dies. It's when you accidentally delete data. It's when someone encrypts your data so you can't retrieve it. And it means you don't have a good backup of that data. It means that you're never getting that data back. So what would happen if you did lose data? Typically if you lost a couple emails and some spreadsheets, that's not going to present a big problem. But what if you're a doctor and you irretrievably lose patient files, or you're a lawyer who loses case files, or an accountant who loses the bookkeeping data for your company? A lot of businesses cannot recover at all from that sort of threat. So additionally, this is sort of a tough thing to quantify. There's no ready calculator available, but a lot of businesses cannot survive certain types of irretrievable data loss. Now we will go into some specific threats. And the first one is the biggest threat of all, is ransomware. We feel strongly that ransomware is the biggest single threat to small businesses today, and it does lead to all three of those abstract threats we talked about: downtime, breaches, and data loss. So what is ransomware? Ransomware is software that is deployed on your computer by a bad actor, and they encrypt your data, and you're locked out of your data or your applications on your computer. And they will let you back in if you pay a ransom, which is delivered in cryptocurrency, which is another problem, is trying to find that cryptocurrency. And then increasingly, they're actually stealing your data before they lock it. So they will go comb through your data, see if there's anything valuable in there, and they'll extort you or coerce payments in order to actually get you to pay the ransom. And you can actually see, there's made the news last year that a large law firm was hit with ransomware, and the attackers were threatening to release data every week. So they actually released data about their clients every single week until the ransom was paid. And so certain contracts and stuff for Madonna and Drake and Lady Gaga were put out publicly. And so that is a huge thing for your reputation and your business. And then there's additional risk with ransomware. If one computer on the network gets it, it's actually pretty easy to spread it to other computers. And then the other thing is, once you are hit and you do decide to pay, which we don't recommend, those attackers are going to keep going after you. So they're going to extort you so that they don't attack you in the future. They're going to extort you so that they don't sell your credentials to other hackers, so that other hackers can attack you. It really comes down to, if people did not pay the ransom, then ransomware would stop, because they wouldn't be making money off of it. But people are still paying the ransom these days. We recommend never paying ransom if you get hit with ransomware. There's always the chance that if you pay them, they're not going to give you the data back anyway. So we sort of take the stance, we don't negotiate with terrorists. So we'll talk about the solution to ransomware. I will say that a company I worked for prior to FlightPath IT, this was about 8 years ago, we had a client who was hit with ransomware 4 times in a month. It was 4 separate people. Their computers got locked up. Some of the data on the servers got locked up. And we vowed that we would not let that happen again. It was just, we were able to recover all the data because we had good backups, but it was just such a heart-wrenching problem to deal with. We decided we were never going to let that happen. But we found that there's actually no one single solution. There's no silver bullet that can prevent and cure ransomware. However, we found that there are many things that we can tie together that give an ultimate solution. And so we actually deploy 6 different measures for our clients. And like the bank vault analogy we talked about earlier, every single one of those measures needs to be subverted in order for ransomware to take hold. So the first measure of the 6 we'll talk about is ransomware prevention kit. And we found a ransomware prevention kit around the time of these 4 ransomware hits at our client. And basically what it is, it's a set of policies that get installed on computers in a network, both Windows and Mac. And basically it sets policies for where data can be written on the computer, and it prevents the common paths that ransomware uses to establish a foothold on a computer. And another component of that going along with it, but not necessarily part of the ransomware prevention kit, is that in general, users should not have full administrator access to their computers in a business. If someone has full administrator access to their computer, it means they can install software, but it also means that if their privilege is subverted, that a hacker can install ransomware as well. It means that software can run either on purpose or accidentally that locks the computer. So if you don't allow users to be administrators, it prevents that. The second measure we take is something called application control. And this is a software agent that runs on the computers on the network. And it basically talks to a master list of known good software. It's called an application allow list. And it allows only known good apps to run. And if something that's not on the list tries to run, the help desk administrators will get an alert, and then they can decide whether the software should be allowed or not. And then there is malware that does masquerade as known good software. And this application allow list knows to prevent that as well, because each piece of software has something called the checksum, which is what the software uses to decide whether it's the software it's pretending to be or not. The second part of application control is something that's called application ring fencing. And what this is in a lot of software, known good software that people use every day, such as Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, browsers, Microsoft PowerShell, those have functions that everyone uses, but they also have functions that are risky and that 99% of people don't need to use. For example, Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel have the ability to launch other programs or start other programs. And a lot of attackers have hooked onto this. And a lot of the ways ransomware gets in right now is through subverting these means of functions that are there, but most people don't need to use. So what application ring fencing does is it actually locks down those risky functions of the known and needed software and prevents them from running. The next solution for ransomware, the next part of the measures we take is deploying next-gen antivirus. So traditional antivirus, your McAfee, your Norton, what it does is it searches for known threats on your computer. They have a master database that has millions of signatures of viruses that they've detected over the years. The problem with that is most ransomware and most threats these days are from unknown sources. So most of the time, these traditional antiviruses aren't really doing much these days. So we deploy what we consider next-gen antivirus, and that works hand in hand with the traditional antivirus. But what it does is it analyzes the behavior on the computer for risky tasks. So if a computer or a user on the computer is doing something that the software would consider risky, then it has the ability to analyze that and shut it down, even though it might not be known as a traditional or a known virus. The fifth solution of ransomware is the principle of least access. And for this one seems sort of elementary. It seems more like common knowledge, but not everyone necessarily knows about this. So what this is just making sure that people at a company only have access to the data that they need to do their job. For example, you wouldn't give access to everyone else's HR data. You don't want necessarily everyone to know everyone's salary or their social security numbers. But you should take that a step further and lock down your data by groups or departments. So what we do is we go into our clients, we audit all their file shares and their cloud repositories. We make sure that everyone is assigned to a group, and then we just give access to the groups instead of individual users. And that greatly cuts down on what people have access to. It also makes it really easy when someone needs to leave a company. You just take them out of the group, and then their user account can't access the data. So essentially what it is we're locking down the data so that it's only usable by the people who need to use it. The next part of ransomware, the next part of the solution, is what we call a no trust network. So back in the day, 10, 15, 20 years ago, you'd go to a computer network and all the devices would be part of the same network. They'd all trust each other. But nowadays, people bring, they might bring a laptop from home, they might bring a smartphone from home, and you don't necessarily want to trust those devices. So we deploy this no trust network. And what that means is any device on the network, if it needs to access data, if you need to print, you have to authenticate. You have to, give password so that the other device knows who you are. And this is good in a modern sense because any device that comes on the network is not implicitly trusted. It can't access files, it can't print, it can't snoop the network. And we actually find that even some of our clients have a BYOD policy where instead of providing computers to their employees, they give the employees a stipend to buy their own. They can bring in whatever they want, but you don't necessarily want to trust anything that folks are bringing in because you don't know if those folks have viruses or malware on their own computer that they're bringing into the network. So no trust network. And then finally, this is the ultimate stopgap of the ransomware problem is you have to have good backups. If you get hit with ransomware and you don't have good backups, your option is either to lose that data or be stuck paying the ransom and the risk with that. So, in a general sense, good backups are critical for everything, but in particular for ransomware as well. And not every backup is the same. So you want to make sure that you have a backup that will restore your data. So you want to be testing those backups occasionally. You want to use a system in place that is sort of foolproof. And for our clients, we offer something called BCDR, that's Business Continuity Disaster Recovery. And this is a solution where all of the data is backed up to the cloud, but also often to an appliance on site at the client. And what that allows us to do is virtualize those servers and data. So if something does happen to a server, if a server dies, if a server hard drive goes, or maybe someone deleted a bunch of data by accident, we're actually able to spin up a virtual copy of that server, often within a matter of minutes, and the company is up and running. So you're not waiting hours and hours for a return to normal. And it's a technology that just 6-8 years ago would have cost 10, 20,000 a month or more. It was sort of like an enterprise technology, but now it's available to small businesses for a fraction of that cost. Excuse me. The second specific threat we wanted to talk about today was identity theft and impersonation. So what is that? This is when someone has access to your passwords. They might have access to your email, your bank, your social media. They might have, your social security number. They might be trying to open credit cards in your name. When someone has control of your identity, they can outright steal money from your bank. They can impersonate you. They can convince your family to move money to you, or your business, your coworkers to move money around. And then they can outright steal your data or data about you and your customers. So what is the solution to identity theft and impersonation? There is one, there's several solutions, but there is one with a bullet, and that is multi-factor authentication. Microsoft has a study published that says that multi-factor authentication is 99.9% effective at stopping unauthorized impersonation. So we are recommending that everyone deploy multi-factor authentication to every account they have. So let me talk about what multi-factor authentication is. With any system that you need to authenticate to, you actually need three criteria. You need something you are, which is usually you or your user ID for that system. Something you know, which is the password you've created to get into that system. And then something you have, which is the multi-factor authentication token. That might be a biometric, such as a token that a card you can swipe at the computer terminal. It might be, facial recognition or fingerprint scan, but most people have it associated it with, using an app on their smartphone that generates a code or an SMS text, a phone call, email. And then the traditional way of multi-factor authentication is, security questions. So what's your mother's maiden name, or what's the street you grew up on? 10 years ago, that was usually the only way of doing the multi-factor authentication. The second part of identity theft and impersonation is, the solution is, the second part is good password hygiene. So not nearly as important as multi-factor authentication, but still very important. We consider passwords as 20th century technology that are still being applied to a 21st century problem. We've made a lot of inroads in the past 5 years about trying to do away with passwords, but I do think that for at least the next 5 or 10 years, they are going to be something that's we're still dealing with. And the problem with passwords is, if you don't deploy them the right way, they're easily guessed, they're easily crackable by modern computers. And so they're not the only factors you should be using to protect your data. So the very first part of the good password hygiene solution is, do not ever reuse a password. You don't want to use the same password at all of your sites. So don't use a password for email that you would also use at your bank. And the reason is because if your data is ever involved with a breach, if your password is ever discovered, that very easily gets traded around on the internet. So if anybody comes across your password for Facebook, they're going to then try that at Twitter. They're going to try that at all the email providers. They're going to try that at your bank. And suddenly, if you've used the same password, they have access to everything. The next one is sort of a tough one for folks, and we understand this, but we recommend not using passwords shorter than 10 characters. And the reason for that is because modern computers that are designed for cryptography are able to crack passwords that are under 10 characters, or there might be an already cracked list that's out there. So in general, for passwords, the more characters, the better. The best password is a long string of random characters that you don't necessarily remember. I'll take a quick stop here and just sort of show this cartoon from XKCD that sort of talks about the length of a password being the most important factor based on how fast computers can crack it. But the essential staple of this cartoon is that through 20 years of effort, we've successfully trained everyone to use passwords that are hard for humans to remember, but easy for computers to guess. So the main thing you want to keep in mind is longer is better. One other way to deal with good password hygiene is to use a password manager. There's a lot of great software out there. One of them that we deploy for our clients is called LastPass. And basically, it's a database that stores all your passwords for you. It logs into websites for you as you go to them. And the great thing about it is there's only one password you ever need to remember. It's the password to get into your password manager. After that, the password manager takes over. It generates passwords for you to use at those websites. You can use it on multiple devices, so you can use it on your smartphone and on your computer. And it allows easy and safe sharing amongst your colleagues or maybe your family members. So we use LastPass in our business, and we're actually storing about 1,500 passwords across all our clients and all the things we need to log into. And it's really easy for us to share data with each other. And it's also really easy to cut off that access. If an employee left, we'd be able to just take them out of access on LastPass, and then they wouldn't be able to access the passwords anymore. The next part of the solution for identity theft and impersonation is just being cautious with your data. Always be cognizant of the personal details you give away, especially on social media. I see a lot on Facebook. There's quizzes like, find out what your elf name is, and you find out what your month is and your date of birth is, and it gives your elf name. But when you then publish your elf name, whoever is tracking this can actually find out your birth date. And through that, they're slowly building up these little database, little profiles about each of us. And these are the same type of profile data that is often used in like security questions. So you don't really want to give away this information on social media. Even though it's fun, it's not safe. The second part of this is, when you are answering security questions that are part of multi-factor, you don't need to be literal answering those security questions. If the question is, what street did you grow up on? You don't have to say, I grew up on Main Street. What you can do is use a little mnemonic and maybe say, Main Street, and then your zip code after it. Or if the question is, what's your mother's maiden name? Maybe put your mother's maiden name, but then also the year she was born. And that way, it's not necessarily easy for other people to guess, but it is easy for you to remember. And then finally, don't leave your personal data hanging around where other people are able to see it in public. So if you work in an office, don't put your passwords or your other personal data as a Post-it note on your computer. Don't leave notes up in a boardroom on the whiteboard. You want to take a photo of that and then erase it at the end of the day, so that folks coming in for a visit or the cleaning folks aren't able to go in and see potentially your company's intellectual property on the whiteboard. And then the last solution to the impersonation and identity theft problem is dark web monitoring. And we deploy dark web monitoring for our clients under a solution we call a breach prevention platform. So the dark web monitoring, basically what it is the dark web is all that data we talked about that's involved with a breach. That's where people go and trade it and find it. If your password is involved with a breach, it's probably published somewhere on the quote unquote dark web. And you can actually check and see if your email address has been involved with a breach. You can go to this website, Have I Been Owned? And that's owned with a P. And you can put your email address in there safely and see if your email address has been involved with a breach. But that's tough to do for a whole company. You'd have to be going in all the time and typing in everyone's email address. So what we offer is a solution called Dark Web Scan and Dark Web Alerting. And that allows us to monitor whole company domains. So we can monitor, for example, mp.hr for our friends at MP. And anytime they've been involved with a breach, any one of their users, we get an alert and they get an alert. And for everyone attending today, if that's something you're interested in, we can offer a free dark web scan. So just hit us up, contact@flightpathit.com, or go to our website, flightpathit.com, and fill out the form. and we will give you a free dark web scan for your company. Excuse me. The last threat I want to talk about, specific threat I want to talk about today, is insider threats. So what are insider threats? Those are basically the employees at your company who might not necessarily be contributing to the company. It ranges from anything from like an unproductive employee, employees going to bad sites that are accidental, or maybe by phishing, but they're accidentally downloading stuff onto the computers that they shouldn't. It might also include poorly trained employees or employees who are just unaware of good practices and hygiene for data security. But it also includes, the theft or loss of a computer. If you accidentally leave your computer on the train, that's also considered an insider threat. And finally, this doesn't happen too often, but when it does, it can be catastrophic, and that's intentionally malicious employees. If an employee is trying to steal your intellectual property, or maybe they're trying to, buy toner. There was a news story about a guy who was buying toner and he stole it and was reselling it from his company. And he actually, stole $200,000 worth of toner before a company caught him. So there is that threat. So what is the solution to the insider threat problem? There's a few, but the first is data encryption. So the first part of that is making sure that all the computers on the network, all the computers owned by the company, are encrypted. And that prevents, the problem of losing the computer on the train or having it stolen. Because if your data is encrypted on the computer, then if someone pulls that hard drive out, and tries to read it, they won't be able to without the decryption key. Another component of encryption is the idea of encrypting outgoing email. So sometimes, we don't consider email the most secure technology. There is the chance that, email is sent in plain text, which means that, people on the recipient end, could be reading it, or, the people that administer the email servers might be able to read it, and not necessarily just the recipient. So the idea is you want to encrypt outgoing email, and we especially would recommend doing that if you have to send personal information data out over email, and that includes credit cards and social security numbers. You might occasionally need to do that. So encrypting email is the way to go. The next part of the solution is going back to our breach prevention platform that I mentioned with the dark web monitoring. It also has these other components about cybersecurity awareness training. So with our breach prevention platform, we're able to assign ongoing training and quizzes to employees about cybersecurity. You can actually compare employees against each other to see who knows more about cybersecurity. It allows you to send out phishing simulations to see who clicks on those. And then, it goes down to being able to assign each employee a risk score, and you can then further remediate the employees who have a low risk score. Maybe they just need more training, or maybe you should think about whether they should actually be employed by you because they do present a risk. The final part of the solution for the insider threat problem is employee productivity monitoring. What this is software that can go on every computer, every employee's computer, and silently track what they're doing. So, it tracks every website they go to, every app they use, how long they're idle. And you can actually go into the portal and categorize each app. So you can categorize visits to facebook.com as non-productive, or for other employees who do need to go to facebook.com, that would be a way to categorize that as productive for that employee. So then you can actually compare and contrast each employee with each other, and see who is idle and how unproductive they are. And you can actually also see screenshots of what they're doing. So if there is an employee you are needing to track specifically, you go in and periodically look at what they're doing throughout the day. I did want to mention that our host, MP, has made great use of this in the COVID work from home environment. And they've actually been able to use this software to show that their employees have been more productive since going to work from home. So it can be used for that as well. Finally, I do want to talk about the future. So, it's our belief that the risk of cybersecurity attacks is increasing. They've gone after all the big targets, but it's still lucrative, so they're going after smaller and smaller targets. So if you think you're not a target because you're not a big business, you still are a target because you have data that is useful to someone. You have credit cards, you have bank accounts, you have lists of clients you deal with, and all of that can be monetized by criminals. Additionally, there's other cybersecurity threats we didn't cover today, such as threats to email, but those threats do have solutions. So if you're interested, we can talk more about that. And then, due to that recent large supply chain attack we talked about with SolarWinds, the US government, the new Congress administration, they are prioritizing cybersecurity. They're making it a higher priority than the previous administration. And hopefully we'll be able to lock this problem down further for many companies. But in addition to that, we believe that since the administration is putting more emphasis on this, that it's going to be opening up tax benefits for investment in cybersecurity. So we really encourage everybody to start thinking about this. I did want to mention some of the vendors that are part of our cybersecurity platform, and that includes Microsoft, Apple, and Google as the top ones, but several other products here as well. Finally, I'll just say that now is always the best time to invest in your company's cybersecurity policy. You don't want to be doing it after you've lost data, after you've been involved in a breach, and after you've been hitting ransomware, because that's when it's going to be a lot more expensive. So finally, we're happy to chat. So if anybody wants to reach us at contact@flightpathit.com or visit our website, flightpathit.com. And now we'll go to the Q&A section. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Jonathan. We do have a few questions here in the queue, so I'll start with the first one. The first one was, are there any trainings you would recommend that I can give my employees on cyber safety? And I think you touched upon that a little bit. That might have come in right before you mentioned that in your talk, but you can kind of brief that if you want again.
Yes, there's many companies out there that do this. One would be called InfoSec. Another one is called KnowBe4, and that's for the number 4. And then the one we use is called Breach Secure Now. Those ones are all geared towards small businesses, but there are others for enterprise as well. And there's many more that I'm not mentioning. But if you have in-house IT, point them in those directions, or if you have outsourced IT like our company, then you might want to hit up your outsourced company and see what solutions they offer.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. The next question we have is, my company is planning on bringing employees back to the office in the next few months. Are there any threats associated with that transition that we should be watching for?
Yeah, that's a good question. One thing you want to think about is if people have had laptops at home, making sure that those laptops are clean when people are bringing them in. So, all the security software is deployed and up to date. All the program updates and operating system updates are up to date because those patches are really important for security. Another thing to think about would just be making sure that, if you want to track employee productivity, think about ways to do that beforehand.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question is, what is the typical size company that FlightPath IT works with?
Sure. So we work with companies mostly in the Boston area, though we have some clients that are outside of Boston. But typically we work with clients as small as 5 employees all the way up to 200 employees. We do everything from day-to-day support, day-to-day service desk, help desk stuff, but also running your infrastructure. So for our larger clients, in the most part, we're running their infrastructure, we're running their network, their backups, their servers, and making sure everything's running smoothly. And typically, if a client has 60 to 80 employees or more, that's sort of the sweet spot for us.
Awesome. Thank you. And we have one last question. What type of information is typically sold on the dark web?
Oh, anything that where you're tying information together. So it might be your email address associated with your password for that email address. It might be, your Facebook login. It might be credit cards and social security numbers. So, those are the main things. Sometimes there's, something called doxing where, a known public figure, their personal data is released, where they live or their phone number. So that sort of thing is also out there for sale.
Awesome. That was the last question we had on the panel for today.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. I really appreciate the time. And Jackie?
All right. Thank you so much to Jonathan and Nicole for presenting today. We want to thank all of you again for attending this webinar. If you have any further questions for the team at FlightPath, please send them to contact@flightpathit.com. We hope you stay healthy and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.